Welcome back to Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm Cary Quashen, along with my co-host, Michael Dougherty. I'm going to hand it over to you, Mike.
Well, Cary, we want to introduce our guest once again here because we're going to be talking about a sexual abuse conference coming up here. And again, we just want to throw out a little bitty warning to any of our listeners out there that may have a young child. We're not going to get into anything nitty-gritty here, but we just want to put out that warning for you.
Even though my opinion is start speaking to your kids when they're young. And people say, well, how young is too young? And I hate to say it, without getting too into it, I don't think any age is too young. I think that we need to teach our kids how to respect their bodies and what's right and wrong and the do's and don'ts and the dangers of society as soon as they can start understanding, and we need to get it hardwired in their brain. If we wait till they're 16 or 17, we got problems.
Well, and our two guests, once again, just to reintroduce it, are Dan Broyles of Grace Baptist Church.
You're not going to read all his stuff.
No.
That might take 2 shows.
It was 30 minutes at least to get through that. And Wendy McHaddad, who is not with Grace Baptist, but she's a volunteer over there and does a lot of stuff with healing from past pain. So one of the ways we could get started here, first of all, Dan, why don't you tell us what's coming up? We're talking about this sexual abuse conference. What is the date? What's it all about? Who should attend?
Right. So us, meaning Grace Baptist, along with NorthPark Church, are co-sponsoring an event on June 10th at NorthPark Church, and it is specifically for anybody that wants to help someone with past abuse, specifically sexual abuse. So if you've ever talked to that friend in confidence, or you have a family member who you hear their story or his story, and you're like, what do I say? How do I really help? This one-day event on June 10th is really going to be helpful on really how to help people feel safe to talk about and what to say, what to do that doesn't cause further harm.
And it is at NorthPark Community Church, because we've been talking about Grace Baptist. We don't want to confuse anybody. And there is a charge for this, too.
So there's a charge for $40, and it is from 8:15 to 2:30 that day, and it's going to be with our guest is Dr. Diane Langberg, who I would say is a world-renowned expert on the area of abuse and trauma. She literally travels the world talking to trauma victims. And so whether you're the professional counselor out there to just a friend who has someone who that's part of their story or anything in between, this is for you. This is really for the community. It's not just for the professional or just the counselor. It's really for anybody.
What about somebody that's been abused, that's going through it? Is this something for them or no?
I would say possibly not for many of those people. If they've never really worked through some of their issues, they don't want to just go to something like that and possibly be triggered or further hurt.
It could bring up more stuff, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I would add to that, if you haven't done any work yourself with counseling or something, I would not recommend this as your first starting place. Okay. However, you have done a lot of work for yourself and your story, I think it would be okay. I just wouldn't want to start here without doing some individual help first.
For people who have gone through it, worked through some of that, who want to now help others by using their own story, that would be a great place to go.
Gotcha. Sounds very, very good. I'll tell you, it's June 10th?
June 10th, it's Friday, and a couple of us had met with her a number of months ago, and she would just tell me some of her stories, just amazing. She was meeting with girls who have been raped in Eastern Europe and literally different places all over the world where she helps out people who have that as her story, and just a really humble woman also.
You know, it's crazy, but I've been working with kids and people for 30 plus years, and whenever I do these intense groups, when we're in when we're with people that are in rehabs or something like that, I'm telling you, a huge percentage of that room has been molested or violated in some way, and I'll even go as far as saying almost half of the kids that I deal with. And when it comes to cutters or any of that stuff, people are hiding emotional pain, and a lot of times it has to do with some kind of sexual trauma.
And we see that a lot in the behavioral health unit.
We do, in our psych units. Oh yeah, in our mental health units, people that come in there, because you can go years and everything is really okay, and then bang, it hits you, and you got some issues.
Wendy, let me ask you this. Let's say somebody out there went through this kind of a trauma, but it's been a while. Okay, we're talking a long time ago. Are they okay?
Well, I don't know about you, but I remember everything. I remember what I was doing on 9/11. If
Yeah,
you
me
ever
too.
sit and listen to a group of women talk about the stories of the children they gave birth to, they remember everything to the nth degree.
Right.
So I don't think we really forget anything. And when it comes to sexual abuse, that's really heavy trauma. We really don't forget it. But sometimes if you're really young and you're going through it, you don't necessarily have the vocabulary for it.
Right.
And you kind of grow into that kind of repressing things. But it will affect you. It affects your relationship and how you see the world and what you believe about people and God and even yourself.
Right, and it can the feelings can change 20 years later. I mean, as if when things that happen when you're young affects you as clearly as you're growing up, but who knows when it can really come in? It's like a bomb, you know.
Yes.
So it's kind of one of those kind of things that isn't talked about enough.
Well, I just think what you said earlier about so many people who are dealing with a substance abuse have sexual trauma or abuse in their past, and they keep trying to work on just not taking a substance.
Right.
When that's not at the core of it, is they have been so hurt and violated in their view of trust. Like if when you said of the world themselves, God, that view of trust has been so turned upside down, they don't even know how to think about life.
Right. And people say that about treatment centers. I mean, what do you deal with in treatments? When somebody comes in our treatment center, for instance, they're not on drugs anymore. The drugs are taken away. Now we're dealing with what's going on and why they're using and the feelings of hurt and guilt and shame and betrayal and all those kinds of things come up. And it's got to be dealt with. It's got to be talked about. I believe we're as sick as our secrets. When we start talking, we get healthy.
Well, and there's just so much loneliness when no one knows our secrets.
Exactly.
There's so much despair in that loneliness. And so one of the things we really focus on is how to really convey to a safe person, not just everybody out there, but to maybe that one safe person, a counselor, or even in our context to God, just some of those secrets instead of dealing with them in such isolation.
Let me ask you, for somebody that's listening out there, Dan, can you give us a phone number? I mean, is there a phone number where they can call and get some help?
Sure. So the number that at Grace, where we have something called Spiritual Care Lay Counseling, or we've had groups, is 296-8737 extension 150. So 296.
Give that one more time. Slightly slower.
296-8737 extension 150, and you can just call and talk to someone in our care office. And one of the things too, people have this idea is if I call and I talk to somebody once, is it going to get all better? And so I'm curious, Wendy, what would you say to the person who's like, I want to just call and just move on and get all better?
I think talking to someone once is helpful, but talking to them more than once is even more helpful. So sometimes you might talk to one person and it doesn't work out. Try again.
And I tell you, I've heard a lot of people say, well, I talked about it and it got worse. Yeah, if you talk about it one time, it might bring up so many different issues. So that's why the more you talk about it, the less it hurts.
I've heard that about physical therapy as well.
Isn't
You
that
go
true?
once, it hurts terribly, and if you don't go back, things get worse. But if you keep going, it gets better.
Exactly. And people say, well, time heals everything. I don't buy that. I don't believe time heals everything. I believe time makes it easier to deal with stuff, but talking actually helps it heal even more. Realizing, number one, you're not alone. I mean, how many people get sexually assaulted a year in this country? I mean, the statistics are incredible.
Sure. And Cary, right along with that, sexual assault is one of our nation's most rapidly growing crimes. Isn't that sad? Is there...
But it's kind of one of those kind of things that so many people don't want to talk about because they're ashamed.
Right.
It's like, but wait a minute. You're not alone.
Right. And there's such healing when people can truly feel loved by whether it's that one friend, that counselor, or even in a faith context with God, that they go, I'm really loved, because their identity is shame a lot of times.
Right.
And so shame just can deteriorate somebody.
Now, is it easier, or maybe this is the wrong question, I may be phrasing it wrong, but is it easier for males or females to deal with this, to come forward and say, hey, I need to get this out?
There are various factors that will determine it. Sometimes your church culture will make it easier or not easy to talk. But I think generally it is harder for men because men are supposed to be strong and capable. But for many women as well, it's very hard because part of the one component of sexual abuse is silence.
Right.
So,
And unfortunately, when it comes to sexual abuse and molestations and all that, usually it's someone that person had trust.
yes.
So now there's so much betrayal going on. It's like, who do I really talk to? How do I really trust people now?
Well, I know specifically for men, a lot of times they don't ever disclose their first disclosure till their 40s or 50s.
No.
And typically, because
Even if it happened when they
even
were
if it
very
happened
young.
when they were 5, 10, 12, or whatever age it was, is as men we're supposed to just handle stuff on our own,
Right.
And we got this. And what happens is in their 20s they have that kind of tough guy mentality, and I got this, I'm my own man. But then in their 40s or 50s, they finally disclose it to typically their spouse,
Right.
and from there they often will start to get help,
They'll seek some kind of counseling.
some counseling or support, right.
One of the things that also in the statistics, if you read through this here, that you find that's really alarming is there's an increase in the number of young perpetrators. These are the people that are putting abuse on people.
Right. One of the contributing factors to that, in my opinion, is what young people see online, and the amount of pornography on there is just pervasive, and the negative impact on kids is brutal.
That's why I said earlier, we really need, especially in today's times, to start talking to our children at a very young age, because I don't know really many 11 or 12-year-olds or 10-year-olds even that don't have a phone. And on any one of these phones, if you just say pornography, you get 500,000 sites for free. They're the most hardcore sexual things you can ever see right here. So our kids are seeing this kinds of things, and younger kids, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to act out what they see. So we really have to start talking to our kids at a young age. We have to monitor what they're doing with their cell phones and their computers. That's hard. It's easier to really talk to them, but I suggest both. What do you think? I mean, isn't the world changed a lot?
It has. And I have 3 sons, and I know they've been exposed,
Of course.
outside of my home. And just, I do talk to them about sexual abuse, and I did from starting, when they were very young. But I tried to consider what was age appropriate
Of course.
for them to,
Of course, no,
hear
I
and
don't want
be
everybody
exposed
to just dive in and start talking, but
Right. I mean,
it's
we don't want
age-appropriate
to
conversations.
let our conversations be what exposes them to sexual abuse
Right.
to begin with.
Right.
So, definitely careful conversations with your
Yes.
children.
Yes, and there's always teaching moments when you're watching television and stuff that are age-appropriate conversations.
Yeah, we would rather watch TV at home or Netflix so we can pause and have a conversation
go.
than when they were younger. We didn't go to the theater because we didn't
Right.
know what was going to pop up.
Yeah, you go to some of these movies and it's like, really? You got these heroes smoking dope, and there's all kinds of sexual stuff, and our kids are just too young to see that kind of stuff.
And people should know that victims of child sexual abuse are more likely to abuse drugs and attempt suicide. So not only do you have the issue of abuse to deal with, but now you have drugs, and now you have this desire to end your life.
Right.
And besides that, other types of substance we would look at would be relationship addiction and
Right.
bad relationship addiction.
Right. One of the things that I think sometimes people think is, I don't hear about this on my daily life, so is it really that bad out there? Especially sexual abuse. And the research has shown over and over, it's approximately for adult women, it's about 1 in 3 have had some sexual abuse in their past of 18 or below. And for males, it's about 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 in their past.
That's pretty horrible numbers, isn't it?
It's staggering, honestly.
I see that.
But it's easier to admit I should stop using heroin
Right.
than it is to say, here's what happened with my uncle. Here's what happened at a overnight visit when I did a sleepover. It's a lot harder to talk about stuff like that when you've been betrayed by trust.
Now let's get this one more time here, and then we'll catch in.
You said betrayed by trust, though, and I keep
there you
wanting
go.
to go back to that. The majority of people that are sexually abused or molested was betrayed by somebody, somebody close to them that they trusted.
Yeah, what we sometimes think of this idea as it's someone in the alleyway there was an assault. Now that does happen. I'm not minimizing it doesn't happen.
Right.
But I've read different research, but 80 to 90% of people, it's by someone who got to know them, even groomed trust.
Right.
And it's the exception of that kind of alleyway assault But it's usually by that friend or family member that built trust over months or even years.
Yeah, I mean, you have date violence, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. But 80 or 90% is someone that's already built some kind of trustful relationship with that person.
Right.
Tell us again about the conference that's coming up.
So it's Friday, June 10th at NorthPark Church. You can go to their website, northpark.com/sexual abuse, or you can call actually NorthPark Church at 296-6784, 296-6784. Pastor Bob Lininger is kind of the pastor who we're working together with. And we really want this to be a community event for really anybody that just cares for people in their community, and really just to how to say things to people that doesn't cause further harm.
And then you said a very effective speaker that you have coming in.
So, and Dr. Diane Langberg, and she's written a number of books on sexual abuse, and Wendy and I both have heard her speak, and one of my favorite speakers literally in the country.
And there is a charge for this.
Yep, it's $40 per person, which includes lunch.
Right. But what a topic, and to help people break through.
Right.
This is amazing.
But let's spend a minute talking about something. This same topic, but different conversation. So, adults, males, for instance, they don't start talking about it to their 40s or 50s. Women take longer. So, how, as a parent, just your suggestion, what would you suggest to a parent? How would you have that conversation with your kid if something happens? How do you make it so the kid's open to talk to you? I think it's super important because you know why? Because the average parent in this country today spends from 11 years old and up spends between 2 and 10 minutes talking to their kid.
Yeah.
How was your day? Good. How was school? Okay. How many homework I done? Are you hungry? I ate. And they're right back on social media.
Right.
With their buddies. So
I think, establishing safety first off for your child to be able to say anything to you with no repercussions as far as how their day was, or whether they ever want to sit on grandpa's lap again, or whether they like someone or not, especially people in positions of authority in their life. Be willing to hear your child say, I don't want to.
Right.
Because they may be actually telling you something important. But we really get hung up on authority, and a lot of times, unfortunately, in a Christian context, we will say you have to obey authority, you have to respect your elders, and many times children will give you clues that you have to really be open to hearing.
And there, exactly. Clues are so important because you know how many times that I've been in group and some kid would tell me something horrible, the stepdad or whatever, the uncle, the grandparents, or somebody, and I would sit down and try to have a conversation with. And the first thing people want to do is blame the kid and all that kinds of stuff. So it's kind of a conversation. You really need to listen to clues. It's like when somebody wants to kill themselves, somebody's suicidal. Most of the time, they're going to give you clues.
Yes.
And that's why people need to know how to deal with this, because let's say, as Cary was just talking about, if a child goes to a parent and starts trying to tell them that something happened that they don't think should have happened, if the parent doesn't respond correctly, then the child is going to depress that and not speak about it for a long, long time because they don't want to have trouble on top of trouble.
Yeah.
Right, and not just press down for a little while, it's years.
Yes, exactly.
40 or 50 years
It
old.
could be years later. Because one of the things sometimes I'll hear is it's so overwhelming for that parent to hear that they'll say things like, are you just doing that for attention?
Right.
Or
Are you
really,
making it
that person would never. It's not believable. Are you kidding me? I know that person. They're a really nice guy, or they're a really nice person.
Can you imagine how your little angel would feel if you said that to them and they were molested by that person?
Right.
Well, even when adults come to us, sometimes it can be tempting to say things like, well, what were you wearing? Or
Right.
were you drinking? Did you inadvertently say something that made them think you wanted that? Or even things like, are you sure you didn't imagine that?
Right.
And we're allowing a victim to actually keep carrying shame that really belongs to someone else.
The same way we treat rape victims.
And
Yes.
there's so much guilt when it comes to, even if they're the victim. I used to run groups for people that were violated and violators. And the biggest thing was, well, maybe it was my fault. How in the world I enjoyed it? Well, of course, they're doing something that made you feel good, even though it was against your will.
Or it went on so long, you begin to think you're a willing participant.
Right. There's
when
so
you're
many
not.
different things that come into mind that would actually help somebody really feel even worse.
Yeah.
But reality is if you're a victim, you're a victim. And the more you talk about it, the more you'll find out, hey, maybe you can forgive yourself and be mad at the real person.
Yes.
We touched on it slightly, but what would you say, Dan, to somebody that was a listener who is hearing this? What would you say to them about to get them comfortable to come to some kind of counseling?
Well, what I would say is that it's never too late to start healing. And
they don't have to live with this.
They don't have to live with it. And in essence, when you start to have some healing in life, you're actually slowly removing the power from the person who caused the harm.
Right.
The more you don't get help and you just think it doesn't affect me, you're really still giving that perpetrator greater power.
For how many years?
And years and years and years. And typically what happens is when families don't address it, families continue to have more secrets generation after generation. When I was a social worker, with Child Protective Services, I would sometimes interview families in which I would say there was generational secrets. And so the impact would go on and go on and go on. And so it is really scary to ask for help. I've had some people drive up to our campus, sit in their car for 20 minutes and never walk in the door and go home because the amount of fear is just so great. And I would say the example of physical therapy is a great kind of word picture to think, yes, this is hard, but it's so worth it. And the other thing I would say is people are worth protecting. Mm-hmm. And the more you can get help for yourself, you'll end up being a better mother, better father, or a better family member because you'll have some healing in your life.
Well, pulling up to the parking lot and sitting there for 20 minutes and driving away, this sounds very familiar to Cary because we talk about that on a regular basis.
It happens to me consistently. You're new. Well, kind of, but I tried to get here a few times. I didn't have the courage to walk in. You know what we find too, and I mean, the more people share how they feel and how they're hurting, the closer you get to people anyways. People feel, hey, somebody asks for help, everybody wants to help. Somebody's hurting, everybody wants to be there for them.
Real briefly.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Real briefly before the break, Wendy, tell us what a success story looks like.
I would say a typical success story would be someone feeling like they are freer from pain and fear.
Is it like a weight was lifted off their shoulders?
Absolutely. People will always say that. They also say that they feel a lot more like they see things accurately. They feel less like a victim. They feel less like someone that everyone else can blame. They feel like they're not alone. They've found their tribe. That's one of the words I like to give because I think it's a really empowering word. You have a tribe out there. A lot of us have these common experiences. Now, I don't have your story, but I have a similar story. Right. And people find relief in that.
And they can realize, too, that, you know what, I can now forgive myself because it really was, I was violated. And they can move on. And like you said, take away some of that power from that person that hurt them so many years ago.
Right. Where you're reducing the shame in their life.
Exactly.
And putting it where it belongs.
There is help.
Absolutely.
That's the important thing. There is help. And if they were not comfortable calling you out at Grace Baptist, they can just talk to anybody that they feel they can talk to, right? Get started somewhere.
Well, there's, go to your clergy person, there's counselors, there's all kinds of special groups and stuff like that. The trick is you don't have to sit on this alone. This is the stuff that haunts you when you're lying in bed at night. This is the stuff that won't let you sleep. This is the stuff that talk in your brain that makes you feel less than you really are. This is the stuff that you can really get rid of if you want to.
Which is why people turn to drugs to get rid of it and turn to suicide to end it.
I was talking to a person at mental health unit chronic cuts all over her body. And the bottom line is it's to cover up emotional pain because of so many trauma things, sexual traumas and other stuff that had happened in her life. It's like, wait a minute, you're beating up the wrong person.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. You deserve better. And you could actually see the light come on when you say things like that. Well, maybe I do. Sick is your secrets. Sick is your secrets. It's time for break. Mike, want to take us on break?
It is. We're going to return with a little bit more of this conversation right here on Families in Action on KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station.
Welcome back to Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm Cary Quashen along with Michael Dougherty, the AKA Silver Fox. We got Dan and Wendy. Dan, I want to hand it right over to you guys because we only have about a minute and a half or so take it.
Yeah, so I'm just, again, thanks just for this opportunity to talk about such an important topic, and I hope to see many of you there at the conference there on June 10th at NorthPark, and whether you're teacher, mom, dad, whatever your role is in the community, just I think that applies to you and everyone. So I actually want to ask Wendy one or two questions about what has helped her heal, because I know you've had a lot of healing and you got to a place where you're helping others, and so what's helped you personally?
Well, I had so much pain and trauma growing up, and at some point I just really got tired of that. I got tired of feeling bad all the time and feeling angry and not trusting. So I started talking. I started talking to anyone who would listen, and eventually I started being able to tell the difference between safe people and not safe people. And once I started kind of gaining that safety and trust for myself, I really wanted other people to experience that. And so a big part of healing for me has been helping other people work through their stuff. One
of our local heroes, huh, Dan?
Absolutely. I mean, she's been doing a group that we have now for 10 years.
It's been 12 years.
12 years.
We only have a very short minute left. How can people get involved in that group? That's really I want to go. I want this and that real fast.
Yeah, gracebaptist.org/care groups. And you can either inquire online about the various groups we have, or you can call that same phone number, 661-296-8737, extension 150. And you can ask the person that answers just about any kind of question. What kind of groups do we have? And we also do individual care if you go through the process of going through an intake.
Very cool.
And you have a huge list of groups over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And before we go, one more time on the date and location and everything.
June 10th at NorthPark Church, starting at 8:15. Sign up at northpark.com/sexual abuse.
Awesome, Mike. Another show.
What a show, and what a topic, and I'm so glad we were able to cover it, and we hope we have a great turnout out there. Cary, we'll be back here next week.
This is Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Dan, Wendy, thank you so much for all you do. Till next week.